He's just a servant, my son-in-law said contemptuously to the wedding guests, pointing at me in my modest suit as if I were a nobody.
The guests nodded, but suddenly someone exclaimed, "I saw him in Forbes." Everyone's mouths dropped open in surprise, and my son-in-law dropped his wine glass. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. Nancy burst through my office door without knocking, her face glowing with pure euphoria. I was deep in a heated call with Tokyo investors about our $500 million acquisition, but the sight of my daughter's breathless excitement made me instantly end the conversation. "Gentlemen, we'll continue this tomorrow." I clicked off the conference system.
"Dad, I'm engaged!" Nancy practically shouted, thrusting her left hand toward me.
The diamond caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting tiny rainbows across my mahogany desk. My Mont Blanc pen froze mid-click. Engaged. The word felt foreign on my tongue. When did this happen?
"Yesterday."
Rick proposed in Bryant Park during lunch. "It was perfect, Dad. He had a whole speech prepared about our future together." She collapsed into the client chair across from my desk, her designer jeans and silk blouse, a stark contrast to the corporate atmosphere. I studied her face carefully. Nancy had mentioned Rick sporadically over the past 6 months, but I knew almost nothing about him beyond his first name and occupation.
"Tell me about him again, Rick Morrison."
He works in investment banking at Steinberg and Associates.
NY's nervous laugh made me lean forward.
"He's amazing, Dad, ambitious, charming, everything I've ever wanted."
"And his family."
Something flickered across her expression. "They're lovely people."
"Actually, that's why I'm here."
She twisted the engagement ring around her finger. "They've invited us for dinner tonight at 6. Rick wants to meet you properly." I moved to the window, watching Manhattan buzz 47 floors below. "What aren't you telling me, sweetheart?" Nancy avoided my gaze. "It's just, could you maybe not mention the company or the Forbes articles? Rick's parents are very down-to-earth, and I don't want them to feel intimidated." There it was. The request I'd been expecting since Nancy turned 18 and started dating. Hide the wealth, pretend to be ordinary. Let them judge us on false pretenses.
"You want me to lie about who I am?"
Not lie exactly, just downplay things. Drive the Toyota instead of the Bentley. Wear something casual. Her voice carried a pleading tone I hadn't heard since she was 12 and wanted a puppy. I returned to my desk, opening the bottom drawer where I kept signed checks for emergencies.
"Nancy, if this man truly loves you, shouldn't he accept all aspects of your life?"
He does love me, but first, impressions matter, and Rick's family values hard work and honesty. They might think I'm some spoiled rich girl if they knew. The irony wasn't lost on me. She wanted them to see her honesty while building the introduction on deception. I wrote a check for $50,000 and handed it to her. "What's this for?" "Wedding expenses. Consider it an engagement gift." I studied her reaction carefully. "Where exactly are we having dinner?" NY's face lit up as she folded the check.
123 Kent Avenue in Brooklyn.
"It's Rick's family home. His parents, Tom and Mary Morrison. 6 sharp." She stood and kissed my forehead. "Thank you for understanding, Dad. This means everything to me." After she left, I stared at the address written on my notepad. The wheels in my mind began turning, remembering Elizabeth's wisdom about character revealing itself when people think nobody important is watching. Perhaps it was time for a different kind of test. I loosened my tie and unbuttoned my jacket, the weight of NY's request settling over me like a familiar burden. The Tokyo call equipment still blinked on my desk, a reminder of the empire I'd built from nothing. Turning to the floor-to-ceiling windows, I caught my reflection against the Manhattan skyline, the same face that had graced Forbes covers, but underneath lay memories of a 28-year-old with $500 and a revolutionary AI algorithm. Elizabeth's photo smiled at me from its silver Tiffany frame. "What would you do, my love?" I whispered to the empty office. I remembered those early days, sleeping on a futon in my first office, living on ramen noodles, writing code 18 hours straight, while Elizabeth brought me coffee and encouragement. She believed in Neuroc when venture capitalists laughed at my presentations. Character shows when people think nobody important is watching. She used to say, "Money doesn't change who someone is, George. It just reveals it." The drive to my penthouse gave me time to think. Park Avenue's familiar elegance couldn't calm the storm brewing in my chest. Nancy deserved happiness, but she also deserved protection from those who might see her as a prize rather than a person. Inside my 3000 QFT sanctuary overlooking Central Park, I found myself gravitating toward Elizabeth's jewelry box on the bedroom dresser. Her engagement ring still lay in its velvet slot, a modest solitaire I'd saved 3 months to afford. She'd loved it more than any diamond I could buy her later. The wall safe behind the Monet held my most precious documents, our wedding photos, NY's first drawing, Elizabeth's final letter. But today I needed something else entirely. In my walk-in closet behind rows of handmade suits hung a garment I'd forgotten existed. A cheap Target suit purchased years ago for a charity event where executives dressed down to understand poverty. I'd worn it once, hated every polyester thread, but kept it anyway. Now it might serve a greater purpose. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Rick Morrison's LinkedIn profile. Investment banking at a mid-tier firm, modest achievements, ambitious language about leveraging synergies.
Nothing spectacular, nothing that screamed gold digger, but nothing that impressed either.
The Forbes article about me was easy to find. Tech visionary George Hartwell from startup to 2.3 billion empire. The photo showed me in my usual confident pose, the caption mentioning my philanthropic work and status as a widower-hour raising Nancy alone. If Rick had done his homework, he knew exactly who NY's father was, but did his family. I walked to the garage where my collection waited, the Bentley, Tesla, Porsche, and tucked in the corner like an embarrassed cousin, my 2010 Toyota Camry, $140,000 made of deliberately maintained mediocrity. Elizabeth's voice echoed in my memory. The best way to know someone's heart is to see how they treat those they think can't help them. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the garage floor. My phone chimed. 4:30 p.m. Reminder. Time to become someone else entirely. I touched the Target suit's polyester fabric and made my decision. The Target suit felt strange against my skin after years of Italian tailoring. Polyester clung where silk would flow, and the slightly wrinkled fabric spoke of storage rather than care. I'd found it buried behind formal wear, still bearing its original tags, despite one wearing at that forgettable charity gala. Standing before my bedroom mirror, I methodically transformed myself. The Patek Philippe came off first, replaced by a $25 Casio with a plastic band that showed the wrong time zone. My Hermes briefcase gave way to a canvas messenger bag with coffee stains I'd borrowed from building maintenance. The iPhone 15 Pro went into my safe, replaced by an ancient Samsung Galaxy A5 that barely held a charge. I practiced hunching my shoulders slightly, shortening my stride, lowering my voice to match the blue-collar accent I'd heard from contractors and delivery workers. George Hartwell, retired plumber, I murmured to my reflection. Modest pension, proud of my daughter's success. Elizabeth's jewelry box watched silently as I removed platinum credit cards from my wallet, keeping only a basic debit card and $47 cash. The transformation felt both theatrical and deeply personal, stripping away layers of wealth to reveal something closer to my origins. My walk-in closet, larger than most Manhattan apartments, suddenly seemed absurd. Rows of handmade shoes, designer suits, watches worth more than houses, all meaningless if they couldn't protect Nancy from making a terrible mistake. The elevator descended to the garage level where Marcus, our 60-year-old concierge, was reviewing evening deliveries. His eyes widened when he saw me, professional training battling obvious confusion. "Good evening, Mr. Hartwell." His voice carried 20 years of discretion. "Will you be needing the Bentley tonight?" "The Toyota?"
Actually, I pulled out the keys to the Camry, watching Marcus's face remain perfectly neutral despite the bizarre request.
"Of course, sir."
"Shall I warm it up for you?" "That's not necessary, Marcus."
"Just if anyone asks, you didn't see me leave in anything unusual tonight?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "I rarely see anything unusual, Mr. Hartwell. Have a pleasant evening." The Camry's interior smelled of vanilla air freshener and worn leather. Compared to my other vehicles, it felt like stepping into a different life entirely. The AM/FM radio crackled to life, playing classic rock instead of the satellite systems I was accustomed to. I adjusted the rear-view mirror and caught my reflection again. The expensive haircut still showed, but everything else screamed ordinary middle-class American, the kind of man Rick Morrison's family would either welcome warmly or dismiss entirely. GPS navigation spoke in its mechanical voice. Proceed to 123 Kent Avenue, Brooklyn. Estimated travel time 15 minutes. 15 minutes to cross not just boroughs, but entire social worlds. I gripped the Camry's worn steering wheel and pulled out of the garage, leaving my real life behind in the shadows of Park Avenue. The Holland Tunnel stretched ahead, carrying me toward what might be the most important performance of my life. Not for business success or personal gain, but for the only thing that truly mattered: NY's future happiness. My daughter trusted Rick Morrison enough to marry him. Tonight I would discover if that trust was justified. The radio played on as Manhattan's skyline disappeared in my rearview mirror, and George the billionaire became George the plumber, driving toward a truth that might shatter everything. The Toyota's engine ticked softly as I squeezed into a parking space between a Tesla Model S and a BMW X5. 123 Kent Avenue looked exactly like I'd expected, a renovated Williamsburg townhouse trying hard to project success. The fresh paint on the front steps showed recent DIY work, slightly uneven but determined. I checked the crumpled paper one final time, 600 p.m. sharp. My cheap Casio read exactly that. The doorbell rang with an expensive chime, though I noticed it was mounted slightly crooked. Footsteps approached from inside, and the door swung open to reveal a man who could only be Rick Morrison. "You must be NY's father." His smile was practiced professional.
Rick Morrison.
"Pleasure to meet you." His handshake was firm but brief. I caught him discreetly wiping his palm on his pants afterward. The $200 shirt he wore wasn't designer, but it was trying hard to look like it. Everything about him screamed calculated presentation. George Hartwell. "Thanks for having me over." I kept my voice humble, adding just a touch of the blue-collar accent I'd practiced.
Come in, come in.
"NY's been telling us wonderful things about you." The interior hit me immediately. New furniture with that slight chemical smell of recent financing. Decorative elements clearly chosen from department store catalogues, and a massive TV dominating the living room like a shrine to material priorities.
Mom, Dad, this is George.
Rick's voice carried toward the kitchen. Mary Morrison appeared, wiping her hands on an apron with theatrical precision. Her scanning gaze took in my target suit, scuffed shoes, and canvas messenger bag in approximately 3 seconds. The smile that followed didn't quite reach her eyes. "How lovely to meet you, George."
I hope you found the place all right.
"GPS got me here just fine, Ma'am." "Beautiful neighborhood you've got." "Well, it's certainly up and coming." Her tone suggested she considered herself instrumental in that improvement. Tom Morrison emerged from the living room, the TV volume lowered but still audible. He offered a perfunctor nod in my direction before focusing entirely on Nancy, who just appeared from the kitchen.
"Nancy, sweetheart, you look radiant. Engagement suits you."
I watched the family dynamics unfold like a carefully choreographed performance. Tom's expensive casual clothes, clearly his best outfit. Mary's costume jewelry designed to look like inherited pieces. Rick's cologne just slightly too strong, marking territory. "Please sit down." Mary gestured toward what was obviously the least comfortable chair, the one with the slightly wobbly leg that guests got stuck with. The living room showcased their priorities perfectly. Books displayed but never read, dust on the spines proving their decorative purpose. Generic brand items partially hidden behind carefully placed name-brand facades. Everything designed to impress, nothing reflecting genuine taste or history. So George Rick settled into his obvious favorite chair, establishing dominance.
"Nancy mentioned you're retired. What line of work were you in?"
"Plumbing mostly. Did some contracting work too." I shifted uncomfortably in the wobbly chair, staying true to character.
"Honest work, you know."
Rick's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. the look of a man confirming his assumptions about social hierarchy.
Our skilled trades. Very practical.
The condescension in that word practical was perfectly calibrated. Not quite an insult, but definitely a categorization. Nancy tells us you work in investment banking, I offered, deliberately mispronouncing investment slightly.
That's right.
Steinberg and Associates. We handle portfolio optimization for high net-to-W worth individuals. His explanation had the air of someone speaking to a child. Complex financial instruments, merger facilitation, that sort of thing. I nodded earnestly as if he'd just explained quantum physics.
Sounds real important.
Nancy shifted uncomfortably on the couch, her nervous laugh filling the awkward silence. Dad's always been great with numbers too, haven't you, Dad? Well, I could balance my own checkbook, I chuckled self-deprecatingly. The family exchanged one of those meaningful glances people think are subtle. Mary's lips pressed together in what might have been sympathy or might have been satisfaction. Dinner should be ready shortly, Mary announced, rising with practiced hostess grace. I hope you like pot roast, George. It's a family recipe. Sounds wonderful, Mum. I appreciate the hospitality. As we moved toward the dining room, I caught Rick's satisfied expression reflected in the darkened window. He thought he'd successfully established the pecking order. He had no idea how right he was, just not in the way he imagined. George, you'll sit here. Mary directed me to the chair that immediately wobbled under my weight. The dining room continued the townhouse's theme of expensive-looking affordability. Mismatched china trying to pass for a set. Silverware polished, but clearly from different eras. Wine glasses being used for water in an attempt at sophistication. The centerpiece looked elaborate until you realized it came from a craft store, and the dimmed lighting was meant to create ambiance, but mostly hid the synthetic quality of everything around us. This looks incredible, Mrs. Morrison. I kept my voice appropriately humble. You shouldn't have gone to all this trouble. Oh, it's nothing fancy, Mary demurred, though her pleased expression suggested otherwise. Just a simple family meal. Rick uncorked a wine bottle with ceremonial precision. This is a 2019 Cabernet from Soma County. Excellent vintage, very well regarded in wine circles. His explanation was clearly directed at me, assuming I'd need basic wine education. Sounds expensive, I offered, watching him pour. Well, when you know what to look for. Rick's smile was patronizing perfection. Tom raised his glass. To Rick and Nancy's future together, and to families coming together, despite different backgrounds. The toast hung in the air like a challenge. NY's face flushed, but she lifted her glass with the rest of us. So, George, Rick began cutting his roast with surgical precision. Retirement must be nice. No more crawling under sinks, am I right? Had my share of tight spaces, that's for sure. I deliberately used the wrong fork for my salad. But honest work's honest work. Absolutely. Rick agreed with the tone of someone humoring a child. Physical labor has its dignity. Of course, in my line of work, we focus more on leveraging intellectual capital. Last week alone, I facilitated a merger worth $50,000 to our firm. I nodded respectfully, though internally I noted that $50,000 was pocket change for a normal business lunch in my world. That's real impressive. Rick has such wonderful connections. Mary chimed in. He dines at Leonardo regularly with clients. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were named, dropping a restaurant where I could buy a table for the year without checking my balance. Nancy tells us you're quite the accomplished young woman. Tom addressed my daughter while effectively ignoring my presence. Graphic design, very creative field. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I love what I do. Of course, once you're married, priorities change, Mary added with meaningful emphasis. Rick will provide well. You might not need to work at all.
NY's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I enjoy my career.
Well, naturally, dear. But there are different kinds of fulfillment. Mary's tone was maternal but firm. Rick understands what it takes to maintain a proper lifestyle. Rick nodded sagely. Financial planning is crucial. Generational wealth doesn't build itself. He glanced at me. I imagine that's not something your family has much experience with, George. Can't say it is, I agreed mildly, suppressing the urge to mention my portfolio could buy his entire neighborhood. That's why NY's so fortunate, Rick continued. She'll never have to worry about limitations again. The word limitations hit Nancy like a physical blow. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, hurt, then something approaching recognition.
More roast, George, Mary offered, clearly uncomfortable with the tension she'd helped create.
This is delicious, ma'am. You're a wonderful cook. My genuine appreciation seemed to surprise her. Well, I do try to keep things nice. She glanced around her dining room with visible pride. We believe presentation matters. Rick's shown me photos of the places he takes clients, Tom added. Very upscale establishments, the kind of places where they know quality. Rick pined under his father's praise.
Image is everything in my business.
Clients need to see success to feel confident in your abilities. Makes sense, I nodded. Trust is important, exactly. Though I suppose in your line of work, George, the clientele wasn't quite as discerning.
NY's knuckles had gone white around her fork. Rick, I'm just saying different worlds require different skill sets. His smile was all teeth.
NY's moving up in the world now. The phrase moving up seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Even Tom looked uncomfortable with his son's directness.
Coffee in the living room?
Mary suggested quickly, rising to clear plates. Sounds perfect, Rick agreed, standing and straightening his shirt. Dad, didn't you want to show George your Cadillac photos?
Oh yes, Tom brightened immediately.
Wait until you see this beauty, George. 15 years old but pristine condition.
Real luxury automobile.
As we moved toward the living room, I caught NY's expression, a mixture of embarrassment and dawning realization that was painful to witness. The evening was reaching its natural conclusion, but the real test was just beginning. Tom's photo album lay open on the coffee table like a sacred text. "This is my pride and joy," he announced, pointing to pictures of a 15-year-old Cadillac. Leather seats, premium sound system, all the luxury features. He detailed each photograph with the enthusiasm of someone showing off a rare artifact, completely unaware that his luxury features were now standard in economy cars. "Very nice vehicle," I offered diplomatically. "Cost me $35,000 when it was new," Tom continued proudly. Of course, that was real money back then. Rick settled into his designated chair with obvious satisfaction. "George, I want you to know I take my responsibilities seriously."
Nancy will never want for anything.
His tone carried the weight of a royal decree. "I understand her background might make this transition challenging, but I'm committed to elevating her lifestyle appropriately." NY's sharp intake of breath was audible across the room. "I'll make sure she has access to the right social circles, proper cultural experiences," Rick continued, oblivious to his fiancée's growing distress. Someone from her background couldn't be expected to navigate these waters alone. That was the moment NY's face truly changed. The love-struck optimism I'd seen all evening finally cracked, revealing something raw underneath. "We should go," she said quietly, standing abruptly.
"Oh, leaving so soon?"
Mary's disappointment seemed genuine. "I was hoping we'd have more time to get acquainted." I stood slowly, the wobbly chair creaking audibly. "Thank you for dinner, Mrs. Morrison. Everything was delicious." The family's perfunctory goodbyes felt rehearsed, ritual politeness masking their obvious relief. Rick didn't even walk us to the door, the ultimate disrespect in any social circle I'd ever known. Nancy retrieved her light sweater from the coat closet without speaking. My cheap jacket hung alone on the expensive coat rack like a surrendered flag. Outside, the cool evening air carried sounds of normal Brooklyn life, couples walking dogs, restaurant patios filled with laughter, the distant hum of traffic from nearby streets. Our Toyota looked even more shabby among the neighborhood's carefully curated vehicles.
"Nancy," I began gently. "Don't." Her voice was tight with controlled emotion. "Just don't start."
"Did you hear the way he talked about you?"
"About us?" She whirled around, tears starting. "He loves me, Dad. They're protective of their family."
"Protective?" I kept my voice calm despite the rage building inside. "Sweetheart, that man just spent 2 hours explaining how inadequate your father is and how fortunate you are to escape your background."
"You don't understand."
The words exploded out of her. This is exactly what I was afraid of.
"You judging them."
Them judging us?
"Nobody giving anyone a real chance." I gave them a chance.
I sat there for 2 hours while they insulted everything about who we are.
Who we are?
NY's laugh was bitter. Dad, you drove here in a 20-year-old car wearing a Target suit.
That's not who we are.
The irony hit like a physical blow.
No, it's not.
But Rick doesn't know that. And look how he treated me anyway. He was nervous. Meeting parents is stressful.
Nancy, listen to yourself.
You're making excuses for someone who just told an entire dinner table that you're moving up in the world by marrying him.
Maybe I am.
Her voice cracked.
Maybe this is my chance to build something better. Better than what?
Better than me? The question hung between us like a sword. NY's face crumpled, but her voice remained defiant.
Better than hiding who I am because you think money corrupts everyone.
Better than pretending to be something I'm not because you can't trust me to make my own decisions. This isn't about trust, sweetheart. This is about character.
His character. No, Dad, this is about control.
Tears were flowing freely now. You can't stand that I chose someone you didn't pick. You can't stand that I might love someone who doesn't worship at the altar of your approval.
Nancy, I'm 28 years old. I'm not your little girl anymore, and Rick is not some gold digger you need to test and approve.
If you marry him, you'll spend the rest of your life apologizing for who you used to be. And if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I gave up my happiness to make you feel better about being alone. The words hit like a physical assault. NY's hand flew to her mouth, but it was too late.
I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean that.
But she had meant it, and we both knew it. If you can't support my decision, then maybe you shouldn't come to the wedding. She ran toward the house, her footsteps echoing off the concrete steps. The front door closed with finality, leaving me alone under the streetlight beside my disguised car. Inside the Toyota, I sat in silence, processing what had just happened. The worn seats, the basic radio, the work receipts scattered on the dashboard, all props in a performance that had revealed more truth than I'd bargained for. My phone showed 9:15 p.m. The test was over, but the real consequences were just beginning. The Toyota's engine turned over with its familiar rough idle, a stark contrast to the purr of my Bentley waiting in the Park Avenue garage. I adjusted the rear-view mirror and caught sight of my own reflection, still playing the part of George the plumber, still wearing the costume that had revealed more truth than I'd bargained for. Pulling away from the curb, I took one last look through the passenger window at the Morrison house. Light spilled from their windows, probably discussing the evening's events, analyzing the poor father who dared enter their refined world. The drive through Williamsburg's gentrified streets felt like traveling between universes, past the artisanal coffee shops and overpriced restaurants that Rick probably considered impressive, toward the Brooklyn Bridge, where Manhattan's skyline waited like a reminder of who I really was. Traffic crawled toward the bridge entrance.
Stop and go. Stop and go.
The evening rush hour trapped me between worlds, literally and figuratively. Around me, luxury sedans and SUVs carried their owners back to comfortable lives while I sat in my deliberate disguise, processing what had just happened with Nancy. Halfway across the bridge, I pulled into the legal viewpoint area and let the engine idle. The East River stretched below, Manhattan's lights reflecting like scattered diamonds on the dark water. This view had inspired me during my early struggling years, back when I'd drive Elizabeth here in my actual beat-up car to dream about the future. I reached up and pulled down the sun visor, revealing Elizabeth's photo tucked behind it, a small silver frame I'd placed in every car I'd owned since her death. Her smile looked back at me, patient and knowing. "She hates me right now," I said to the photo, my voice barely audible over the bridge traffic.
Our daughter thinks I'm a controlling monster who can't stand her happiness.
Elizabeth's remembered voice seemed to whisper back. "Give her time, George. Love doesn't disappear overnight, even when it's hurt. But what if she was wrong? What if I'd pushed too hard?" Revealed Rick's character in a way that forced Nancy to choose sides. The look in her eyes when she'd run back to that house. It wasn't just anger. It was disappointment in me. The radio crackled to life, an old song filtering through the static.
Our wedding song.
Elizabeth had insisted on this cheesy romantic ballad, and I'd pretended to hate it while secretly loving how it made her smile. Now it felt like a message from beyond, or maybe just cruel coincidence. I reached over and turned up the volume, letting the memory wash over me. Elizabeth in her simple wedding dress, spinning in our tiny apartment kitchen, insisting we practice our first dance even though we couldn't afford lessons. Character shows when people think nobody important is watching, she'd said that night, laughing as I stepped on her feet. Tonight, Rick Morrison had shown his character perfectly.
But so had I. The song ended, replaced by traffic reports and commercials.
I put the car in drive and merged back into the flow toward Manhattan, passing under streetlights that illuminated other couples heading home from dinner dates, normal people with normal problems. Through Lower Manhattan, past restaurants where I could buy every table without checking my balance, past galleries where Elizabeth and I used to browse on Sunday afternoons when money was tight but dreams were limitless. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the evening being looked down upon by people who couldn't afford my monthly parking fees. By the time I reached Park Avenue, exhaustion was setting in. The emotional weight of maintaining the performance, of watching Nancy defend someone who'd spent 2 hours insulting everything about her background, of seeing my daughter choose loyalty to Rick over respect for her father. The garage attendant who took my keys knew exactly who I was, but his discretion was legendary. "Good evening, Mr. Hartwell," he said simply, as if billionaires regularly returned home in 15-year-old Toyotas wearing Target suits. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt eternal. In the mirrored walls, I saw George the plumber one last time before returning to my real life. The costume had served its purpose, but the damage to my relationship with Nancy felt irreversible. My key turned in the lock and I stepped back into my actual world, still wearing the clothes of a lie that had revealed an unbearable truth. The polyester suit felt suffocating against my skin as I finally stripped it off in my penthouse bedroom. Each piece of the costume, the cheap watch, the messenger bag, the scuffed shoes seemed to carry the weight of the evening's revelations with it. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of professional obligations and personal torment. Board meetings continued.
Acquisition deals progressed.
The Neurarch empire hummed along, but my heart wasn't in any of it. Mark, my assistant, noticed immediately. "Sir, the Henderson merger documents need your review," he'd say. Then wait patiently while I stared out the window at Central Park, seeing NY's angry face instead of spring foliage. Starting May 18th, I called her every day, 3 times a day, actually, morning, lunch, evening. Her phone went straight to voicemail each time, the telltale sign of a block number. My messages grew increasingly desperate.
"Nancy, sweetheart, please call me back."
"We need to talk about what happened. Then I know you're angry, but I love you."
"That hasn't changed."
"Finally, I just want you to be happy."
"That's all I've ever wanted."
The flower delivery attempt on May 20th was equally futile. 3 dozen white roses, her favorite since childhood, returned to the shop with a Tour delivery refused notation. The handwritten note I'd included written on my personal stationery came back unopened. Desperate for any connection to my daughter's life, I found myself checking her Instagram account. She'd never made it private, probably never imagining her father would resort to social media stalking. The posts were a catalogue of wedding preparations, dress fittings, venue tastings, bridal shower photos with friends I'd watched grow up. Rick featured prominently in every image, his arm around NY's waist, his smile proprietary and satisfied. There were no mentions of me anywhere. It was as if I'd been completely erased from her wedding narrative. "Mark, I called one afternoon in late May. I need you to research something for me discreetly."
"Of course, sir."
"The Plaza Hotel, June 5th. There's a wedding reception."
"I need to know the details."
Mark's expression remained professionally neutral, though I caught the slight raise of his eyebrow. 20 years of working together had taught him when not to ask questions. By evening, he had a complete report. Morrison Hartwell wedding, 200 guests, afternoon ceremony in the Oak Room, evening reception in the Grand Ballroom. Total cost approximately $150,000. Rick's contribution $50,000 cash, plus $100,000 in credit obligations. The financial details confirmed what I'd suspected. Rick was leveraging his future with Nancy to pay for a wedding designed to impress people with money he didn't have.
One more thing, Mark. Get me Bill Patterson's direct number at the plaza.
We did that charity event there last year, the Children's Hospital benefit.
That's the one.
Shopping for wedding attire felt surreal. At Bergdorf's, I selected a charcoal Armani suit, Italian silk tie, and a new PC Philippe watch. The kind of accessories that would immediately identify me to anyone who understood wealth. No more costumes, no more hiding. NY's Instagram posts continued throughout the week. Bachelorette party at an upscale restaurant, final dress fitting, manicures with her bridal party. Each image was another dagger showing a daughter who'd found a way to be happy without her father. On June 4th, the night before the wedding, I sat in my study with Elizabeth's photo and a glass of 30-year-old scotch. She doesn't want me there, I told the image. She's made that clear. But Elizabeth's smile seemed to say what she'd always said. Sometimes love means showing up when you're not wanted. The alarm woke me at 7 a.m. on June 5th, wedding day. Through my bedroom windows, Central Park sparkled in morning sunlight, the kind of perfect weather Nancy had always dreamed of for her wedding. I showered, shaved, and dressed with the precision of a general preparing for battle. The Armani suit fit like a second skin. The Pec Philippe caught light from the window. The Italian leather shoes reflected the marble floor. In the mirror, I saw George Hartwell as the world knew him. Successful, powerful, uncompromising. The kind of man who didn't take no for an answer, even from his own daughter, especially from his own daughter. My phone showed several Instagram notifications. Nancy had posted a wedding morning photo, radiant in her robe, surrounded by bridesmaids, champagne glasses raised in celebration. I called Bill Patterson. "George, congratulations on NY's wedding. I assume you'll be needing our VIP service today."
Actually, Bill, I need a different kind of favor.
The black Mercedes S-Class limousine pulled up to the plaza's Fifth Avenue entrance with whispered precision. My chauffeur, uniformed and white-gloved, opened the door with practiced deference. Stepping onto the sidewalk, I felt the weight of my authentic self. $5,000 Armani suit, PC Philippe gleaming at my wrist, Italian leather shoes reflecting the plaza's legendary marble. The transformation was complete. No more plumber costume, no more Target polyester. This was George Hartwell as the world knew him. Billionaire tech mogul, the man whose photo graced Forbes covers. Other wedding guests were arriving in their own luxury vehicles. BMWs, Lexuses, a few Teslas, designer gowns, and expensive suits. The carefully curated appearance of success. But none of them carried themselves with the quiet confidence that came from actual wealth rather than its imitation. Through the plaza's glass doors, I could see the legendary Palm Court, its palm fronds and crystal chandeliers creating the backdrop for afternoon tea that cost more per person than some people earned in a week. String quartet music drifted from the lobby, and professional photographers captured every arrival for NY's wedding album. The security checkpoint appeared around the corner, staffed by a polite but professional guard with an iPad guest list. "Good afternoon, sir. Name, please." "George Hartwell." His finger scrolled down the screen, paused, scrolled again. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't see that name on our registry." "There must be some mistake."
I'm the bride's father.
The guard's expression softened with genuine sympathy, but his training was evident. "I understand this is difficult, sir, but my instructions are very clear. Only guests on the approved list may enter." Around us, other guests moved freely past the checkpoint, their names quickly located and checked off. A few turned to stare at the well-dressed man being denied entry, whispers rippling through the crowd. "Perhaps if you called the wedding planner," I suggested, maintaining my dignity. "I'm afraid that's not possible, sir. The ceremony has already begun." The humiliation of being turned away publicly stung more than I'd expected. Here I was, in my own element, at a hotel where I donated hundreds of thousands of dollars, being refused entry to my daughter's wedding. I stepped aside and pulled out my phone, speed dialing Bill Patterson's direct number. "Bill, it's George. I'm in your lobby and there seems to be a misunderstanding about my access to the Morrison-Hartwell wedding.
Give me 30 seconds.
True to his word, Bill appeared almost immediately, crossing the lobby with the measured urgency of a seasoned hotel executive, mid-50s, impeccably dressed.
Radiating the kind of professional competence that made the plaza legendary. Mr. Hartwell, my sincere apologies.
Please follow me. He led me away from the main guest flow through a discreet service corridor marked Hotel Personnel Only. The transition from public luxury to working efficiency was seamless, marble floors giving way to practical carpeting, crystal chandeliers replaced by functional lighting.
I understand this is a delicate family situation, Bill murmured as we walked.
We'll get you inside without any further complications. The service route took us through the plaza's working heart, past the commercial kitchen where white uniformed staff prepared dinner service for 200 guests. I caught glimpses of the wedding cake, a 4-tiered masterpiece that probably cost more than most people's cars. The kitchen staff moved with practice efficiency, some glancing curiously at the obviously wealthy man being escorted through their domain. Bill's presence legitimized my passage, and several nodded respectfully as we passed. The ceremony should be concluding momentarily, Bill explained quietly. I'll position you near the service entrance to the grand ballroom. You'll have a clear view, but you can exit quickly if needed. We reached a discreet door marked Ballroom Service. Bill's hand paused on the handle. Mr. Hartwell, are you certain about this approach? I could arrange a more conventional meeting with your daughter after the ceremony. I've tried conventional, Bill. This is my last chance to see if I was right about her choice. He nodded with understanding and opened the door. The grand ballroom took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over 200 guests in elegant attire, elaborate floral arrangements worth more than most people's annual salaries, and a live orchestra providing classical accompaniment to NY's wedding ceremony. And there she was, Nancy, radiant in her wedding dress, standing beside Rick at an altar decorated with white roses and baby's breath. Even from my position at the ballroom's periphery, I could see her happiness, the joy that made her practically glow. The officiant was speaking.
You may now kiss the bride. Rick lifted NY's veil and kissed her with theatrical passion, clearly performing for their audience.
Applause erupted throughout the ballroom as my daughter officially became Mrs. Nancy Morrison. I remained at the edge of the crowd, partially concealed by the service corridor entrance, watching the recessional begin. Guests started to turn and mingle. Champagne appeared on silver trays and congratulations flowed freely. Rick, basking in the attention, began scanning the crowd with obvious satisfaction. His moment of triumph, his successful social Cara. I caught sight of Nancy turning and toward the commotion, her wedding dress flowing behind her as she moved through the crowd. Michael Steinberg's tablet glowed as he held it high, the Forbes article clear for everyone to see. My photo stared back from the screen. Confident, successful, the man I actually was rather than the costume I'd worn to their dinner. Look at this, Michael called to the growing crowd. George Harrison, Neurock founder, the AI visionary who transformed predictive analytics. Net worth, $2.3 billion. Phones emerged from every direction. Google searches multiplied across the ballroom as guests verified what Michael had discovered. The quiet murmur of investigation grew louder with each confirmation. Here's another article.
A woman in diamonds announced, reading from her screen.
Harrison's charitable foundation donates $50 million annually to education initiatives.
And this one added a man in an expensive tuxedo.
Neurock stock reaches all-time high under Harrison's leadership. Rick remained on his knees, surrounded by broken glass, his face cycling through denial, shock, and growing horror. The perfect wedding he'd orchestrated was collapsing around him in real time.
This is impossible, he whispered, though his voice carried in the sudden hush.
You wore a Target suit. You drove a beat-up car. You said you were a plumber. I never said I was poor, Rick. You assumed that because of how I looked. I adjusted my PC, Philippe, the gesture unconscious but noticed by several guests. You treated me with contempt because you thought I couldn't help your career. The crowd pressed closer, smartphones recording every word. In the digital age, humiliation could go viral instantly, and Rick's professional reputation was crumbling with each passing second.
Please! Rick scrambled to his feet, reaching desperately for my hands. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. If I had known you would have kissed my feet. I stepped back, avoiding his grasp.
The same way you're doing now. Mary and Tom Morrison appeared at the edge of the crowd, their faces pale as they recognized the scope of the disaster. Their son wasn't just being embarrassed. He was being professionally and socially destroyed. We didn't know, Mary whispered to anyone who would listen. We had no idea who he was, but the damage was spreading beyond their family. Guests were sharing the videos on social media, tagging professional contacts, spreading the story across their networks. Rick's behavior wasn't just being witnessed. It was being documented and distributed. 2.3 billion, someone repeated in the crowd, and they treated him like the help.
At his own daughter's wedding, another voice added with disgust.
Rick tried once more to grab my arm, his desperation obvious to everyone watching. Mr. Harrison, sir, please.
I love Nancy. I would never hurt her.
This was all a misunderstanding. No, Rick. My voice was quiet, but carried perfectly in the hushed ballroom. This was a character test, and you failed. The social dynamics of the room had completely shifted. Guests who, moments before, had been enjoying champagne and conversation were now witnessing a masterclass in social justice. The man who had judged others by their appearance was being judged by his actions. Someone's coming, a guest near the back announced. Through the crowd, I could see Nancy approaching, her wedding dress trailing behind her as she moved with purpose through the parting guests. Her face showed confusion at first, then growing recognition as she saw me standing in the center of the commotion. Dad! Her voice cut through the ballroom noise like a knife through silk. The crowd fell completely silent. Even the string quartet stopped playing, sensing that something momentous was about to happen. Nancy stood at the edge of the circle, taking in the scene. Her new husband on his knees, broken glass scattered around him, guests holding phones displaying my Forbes profile, and me standing calmly in the center of it all.
Dad, what are you doing here?
Her voice was small, confused, but not angry. I looked at my daughter, beautiful in her wedding dress, radiant despite the chaos surrounding her, and felt my heart break and heal simultaneously. I came to see my daughter get married, I said simply, even if she didn't want me here. NY's eyes filled with tears as understanding washed over her face. The elegant wedding dress, the broken champagne glass at Rick's feet, the crowd of guests holding phones, displaying my Forbes profile. It all clicked into place.
You're not a plumber, she whispered. I never was, sweetheart.
I just wanted to see what kind of man you were marrying. The ballroom fell silent, except for the soft rustling of NY's dress as she moved toward me. Each step created distance between her and Rick, who remained frozen in his humiliation.
I'm so sorry, Dad. The words came out in a rush. I should have listened. I should have trusted your judgment.
My arms opened automatically as she reached me, and suddenly I was holding my daughter again.
Wedding dress and all.
The expensive fabric crushed between us, but neither of us cared.
I love you, I whispered into her hair. That's all that matters.
The crowd around us seemed to exhale collectively, some wiping away tears at the father-daughter reunion. Phones shifted from recording confrontation to capturing reconciliation. After a moment, I gently stepped back and looked toward the wedding band. May I borrow your microphone? The band leader, sensing a moment of importance, quickly handed over the wireless mic. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying across the ballroom. I want to thank you for sharing this important day with my daughter Nancy. Despite some complications, this is still her wedding day, and she deserves to celebrate. Applause rippled through the crowd. Nancy squeezed my hand, tears still flowing but her smile radiant. I also want to establish some new family ground rules. I looked directly at Rick, who had finally managed to stand up. Nancy has chosen to marry Rick Morrison, and I respect that decision. However, Mr. Morrison and I will maintain a strictly professional relationship going forward. Rick nodded frantically, understanding that he was being offered survival rather than forgiveness.
Nancy will always be welcome in my home.
Her husband will be tolerated when necessary, but only because Nancy loves him. I paused, letting the message sink in. Are we clear on these terms?
Yes, sir.
Rick managed, his voice barely audible. I handed the microphone back to the bandleader and turned to Nancy. Now, would you honor me with a dance? I'd love to, Dad. As we moved to the dance floor, the crowd began to disperse, conversations resuming with new energy. The revelation had provided enough gossip material for months, but the gracious resolution satisfied their sense of justice. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and I guided Nancy through the steps we'd practiced when she was 12, and still believed her father was the smartest man in the world. I really messed up, didn't I? She said quietly. You fell in love? That's not a mistake. I spun her gently, her dress creating a perfect circle around us. But maybe next time, trust your old man's instincts about character. There won't be a next time, she laughed through her tears.
I'm married now.
Yes, you are. And despite everything, I hope you'll be happy. From the corner of my eye, I could see Rick watching us from the sidelines, his parents beside him looking shell-shocked. The Morrison family's social climbing had backfired spectacularly, but they would survive. Rick would remain married to Nancy, but on terms he never could have imagined.
Will you really let him come to family dinners?
Nancy asked. If you want him there, yes, but he'll sit at the children's table. NY's laughter filled the ballroom, pure and joyful. Around us, guests resumed their celebration, but with a new appreciation for the drama they'd witnessed. Social media posts were already spreading the story, but now they emphasized the heartwarming reconciliation rather than just the humiliation. The Plaza Hotel had seen countless weddings, but this one would be remembered.
A father's love, a character test, and a public demonstration that true class had nothing to do with bank account balances.
As the song ended, I kissed NY's forehead and smiled. Welcome to married life, sweetheart. Just remember, if he ever treats you badly, you know where to find me.
I love you, Dad. I love you too.
Now go enjoy your reception. You're only going to have one wedding day. She returned to her new husband, who took her hand with obvious relief and gratitude. The celebration continued, but the power dynamics had shifted permanently.
Elizabeth would have been proud.
If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.